Hello, everyone. I'm Margaret DiCristina, Dean of Boston University's College of Communication. I'm also a COM alum and the parent of a recent BU grad. It's my genuine pleasure to welcome you today to today's discussion, Careers in the Metaverse. Today's event is part of a series of virtual events we do at COM called COMtalks. They feature topics and experts in journalism, advertising, public relations, film, television, and media science. And today's event will be recorded and will be available for you to watch later online, either on COM's website or through our YouTube channel. Often described as the next iteration of the internet, the metaverse is expected to transform how we work, play, and interact with the world and with each other. Companies, creators, and innovators alike are investing vast amounts of time and resources to build out the metaverse ecosystem. What are some of the main career and entrepreneurial pathways for working in the metaverse today? And where are things headed? Thank goodness our panel of expert industry leaders and COM Media Ventures alumni will help us sort through it all. Let me introduce you to each of them. First, Gohree Kim is a vice president of marketing for AmazeVR. In this role, she helps lead the company's work in building virtual reality concerts and music. AmazeVR just released the first ever VR theater tour in 15 cities at AMC Theaters with Megan Thee Stallion. Prior to AmazeVR, Gohree promoted live shows around the world for almost 10 years, bringing her favorite artists to two new markets around the world and helping to take K-pop to new levels. BTS and Blackpink were among the many artists she helped to promote, and Gohree graduated from COM here in 2012. Welcome, Gohree. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's say hello to Jonathan Goodlow, who's product manager at Google, where he works with virtual reality and augmented reality products. His background is in art and animation, and he began his career in the video game industry with 10 years as a 3D artist. He's a 2015 graduate of COM's Media Ventures program. Welcome to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Awesome. Now let's say hello to Gohree Sharma, who's vice president and product and strategy at Skybound Entertainment, where she leads the e-commerce, licensing, and merchandise verticals for global entertainment IPs such as The Walking Dead and Invincible. In her role, she oversees business strategy and execution for direct-to-consumer products, connecting the dots between creators and fandoms through unique experiences. Gohree started her career as a journalist in India with the Hindustan Times, followed by the Times of India, where she led content and monetization strategy for multiple entertainment publications. In 2015, she moved to the US to work at the intersection of entertainment, media, and commerce. And she's a 2016 grad of COM. Thanks so much for joining us today, Gohree.
Thank you for having me.
Moderating our discussion today is Margaret Wallace, an associate professor of the practice here at COM, who spent the previous 3 decades in the video game industry. She founded Playmatics, an interactive game studio, in 2009, and was the head of gaming technology and metaverse for the Swiss blockchain company Prosaga. At COM, Margaret is putting that experience to use in our Media Ventures program, where students learn how to develop their ideas into products and businesses that sit at the intersection of media and technology. And Margaret is a COM graduate herself. Welcome to you, Margaret, and I'm now going to turn the virtual mic over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean DiCristina, for this introduction. And a heartfelt thank you goes to the College of Communication and my colleagues at Boston University for making this possible. And for those of you in the audience, I also want to extend an extremely warm welcome and thank you for being here. If you feel so inclined during this discussion, I want to invite you to submit questions in the Q&A section of the interface, the Zoom interface. I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions as we progress through this discussion. As Dean DiCristina mentioned, I recently joined Boston University as a professor of the practice, where I focus a large amount of my time on the Media Ventures program, a 12-month program that takes place both in Boston and Los Angeles. And it's a master's level program where students get an opportunity to develop their ideas into products and businesses that are at the intersection of media, innovation, and technology. I'm going to quickly set some context for this discussion, and I'm going to really hand it over to our amazing group of panelists to really lead this discussion. The term metaverse, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, was first coined by author Neil Stephenson, who also happens to be a BU alum, in his massively influential cyberpunk novel from 1992 called Snow Crash. The novel described a virtual world that people could inhabit, gather in, and live and exchange money and commerce and real estate. And that is where we first came upon the term metaverse. And for as long as I've been working in the tech industry, I've had so many conversations with software engineers, content creators, game developers, IP stakeholders about the metaverse and their vision for how to make it a reality. Sometimes we refer to it as a virtual world. Sometimes we talk about it as a game, a gaming context, online game. However, it's been something that has captivated the minds of just about everyone I've encountered in my experiences working in tech and games and interactive entertainment. Flash forward to the present day, we're at a point where technological innovations are enabling many of these metaverse instantiations. Companies, brand stakeholders, governments, scientists, creators, and all kinds of innovators are investing vast amounts of time, resources, and money to stake their claim. In fact, there are certain municipalities and countries which have digital transformation strategies in place where there are metaverse strategies already part of the plan. Anyway, so it's a huge topic, and beyond the hype, what we're here to talk about today is what will it take to build out this metaverse ecosystem? How might it redefine the concept of work and career pathways in this evolving landscape? What are some of the entrepreneurial decisions or technological innovations that may or may not enable things in terms of what we discuss or describe as the metaverse? So we have an amazing group of panelists today. And to my fellow panelists, I was hoping we could just start off where if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, your company, and your role there. And so to get started, why don't we begin with Gohree, and then we'll just go around, and I would love to hear more about that from each of you.
Hello, my name is Gohree, and Gohree Kim. I lead marketing at AmazeVR. And what that means is we're a startup and we're pioneering VR concerts, which has never been done before, in the sense that, well, first, our vision as a company is so that every artist would have their own VR concerts by 2030. So what that means for my job as lead of marketing is I'm working with artists to have a vision for their creative development. And with that, I figure out what their story is, what their vision is. And then while we're building out that VR concerts, I'm also building out the messaging, the marketing, the creative, everything that you will see online or in VR, I'm building. During that process, I'm also working on artist relations, selling our vision to other artists, sourcing artists, distribution and promotion. So that also includes offline and online. We just released on the Quest, Meta Quest this week, and we're also releasing on the Pico headsets this month. That also means strategy, and we're building a platform so that soon, in the next 6 months, you can experience every artist in one place. And that's what I do at AmazeVR.
That's awesome. I have so many follow-up questions, which we'll get to.
Cool. Is there anything else that I missed that I should share?
So who would like to go next to introduce themselves? Garima?
Sure. You're saving the best for the last. I see that.
No.
Garima Sharma, Vice President of Product and Strategy at Skybound Entertainment. I always say in my introductions, that's just corporate jargon for we make cool shit. That's what I do. So I'm on the completely other end of the spectrum from Jonathan and Gohree. While their roles are more tech related, I work for a traditional entertainment company. For those of you familiar with the comics world or with a little known TV show called The Walking Dead, we created that IP. So the writer of The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman, about 12 years ago, created this company called Skybound Entertainment to really be a creator-centric organization in entertainment that focused on the creator and their voice. We represent about 200 different IP and thousands of characters across comics, film, TV, audio, podcasting, merchandising, licensing, etc. My role here sits with taking all of these IPs and turning them into physical products. I don't oversee video games and I don't oversee comics or editorial products, but any other physical item that's created and soon to be digital items that are created based on these IPs falls under my purview. I also run our entire games business, which in our world is the tabletop business. So soup to nuts, everything that goes in creating a tabletop game falls under me. I've raised tens of millions of dollars on Kickstarters for crowdfunding these games. My last project for a tabletop game called Trial by Trolley generated about $3.2 million in 30 days on Kickstarter, and we had about 60,000 backers globally. So it's a fun world in commerce right now. We are at a point where the metaverse is coming from all ends, but it's at a very interesting intersection. I'm sure Margaret has questions for me, but that's me for now, and I'm going to pass it off to Jonathan.
That's awesome. I unfortunately make I make Google $0 with what I do, so that's great. Oh,
$0 equals €0.
that's my Google stuff going off. So we have been working on, or I work in their AR group. We're working on head-mounted devices. And lately we've announced a prototype of ours that focuses less on the big metaverse and living in another world, and more focusing on how we can be more simple and helpful to what's already around you and what information we already provide to you. So in that prototype, we announced there were live translation glasses with a single display that enables you to hear another language and have a live transcription of that language to whatever, say English native language you want it translated to. So more simple AR like that can start in a way that is the most helpful and kind of then evolve into possibly something larger. So that's what I've been working on for the past 3 years. It's, again, we have not made any money. We've started over a few times, and we think we've landed on something that could really be helpful to our users and provide extra added value to Google's already popular first-party apps.
Yeah, and what a meaningful interaction to have that real-time translation. I mean, what a wonderful use case that actually has a lot of substance to it. So I applaud you for that focus. So I'm going to throw out a question to all the panelists right now, and maybe we could start with Garima, but feel free to everyone to jump in. I know that the term metaverse is a very often much contested term. I know I have my own nuanced opinion about what it means and how to describe it. How would each of you describe the metaverse to our audience right now?
Sure. I mean, I have a very, very simplistic view. In my mind, it's a 3D space for immersive experiences, which over time will get more and more personalized. To me, that's what it is. It's over time, I think it'll also become this centralized place. I keep going back to, and my examples may be a little rudimentary, but I keep going back to Ready Player One. In my mind, that's what it's going to look like. Eventually, I think right now we are looking at different fragments of the puzzle, or different pieces that everyone's experiencing with different brands and their brand extensions and experiments. I don't think it's all come together in this one large space, but I think ultimately it could be a one-to-one replica or a digital experience of our physical lives. But I think right now we just have very disjointed pieces. Also, before I hand over the virtual mic to other people, I do want to give a shout out to Professor Jody Luber, my absolutely favorite professor. She was single-handedly responsible for pushing me to attend talks like these when I was at Com. So Jody, if you're there, hello, and thank you.
I second the shout out to Professor Jody Luber, who is just an amazing leader, director of the Media Ventures program, just an amazing mentor and force of nature. So thank you for mentioning that, Garima. And then in terms of the Ready Player One, I just want to make sure folks know that it's a novel by Ernest Cline. I went to one of the first gatherings for the new Oculus way back when, and we were such a small group that the founder of Oculus then handed each of us a signed copy of Ready Player One. So Snow Crash, Ready Player One, these are consistent themes in our metaverse discourse. Anyway, so thank you, Garima, for sharing that insight. Who wants to go next about how you define the metaverse?
I guess I'll go. I think I agree for the most part with what Garima's saying, but I have lots of issues myself with these possibilities of like this totally joined digital world. I think there's so many issues I see with it. Just comfort of what device you're wearing, like from studies like I've seen at work, people have a lot of problems just having a device on their face for, more than 10, 15 minutes. So trying to imagine people doing a day of work in a device like this just sounds kind of impossible to me. And then I go back to my past in video games, which I think is the best, clearest example of an actual metaverse, which they've had for a while. Anyone who's played World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, they've just now started being able or allowing different systems, different companies to allow players to play on the same game. So for example, now if you're on an Xbox or you're on a PlayStation, now you can play the same game together, where before it was like, no, we want our own world. We don't want to allow that. And I think that's going to be a problem with the metaverse as well, is there's going to be a metaverse for each large corporation, and they're not going to want to join those together. They're going to want to control their own currency and control their own content, and they will not want other people to be able to access that. So that's what I see as an issue.
Yes, the issue of interoperability in terms of how the metaverse will evolve is certainly a contentious issue. And I know that the vision is to have a single metaverse, or a lot of people have that vision to have a single metaverse. And yet so much of this technology is built on top of Web2 know-how and companies. And so is there really the potential to reach that kind of grand vision, and what are the ramifications for companies right now in terms of ownership, data sharing, privacy? I mean, it's just such a huge challenge to face as we're rolling out this next phase of the internet, which is one of the ways I describe the metaverse. Gohree, would you please tell us how you define the metaverse?
Yes, so since I specifically work within the music metaverse space, for us and for me, it's really the convergence of the best possible in the physical and the virtual combined, a democratization of both. And so like for our experiences, fans, anyone around the world who have had the access can experience artists up close, even up close and more up close and personal than when you can at a live concert, but then also experience the imaginations and the features of doing crazy things in virtual at a reasonable price, where you have a better experience than the front row at a VIP package of any in-live person concert. So that's how it is for us.
No, that's great. And I really want to thank everybody so far who has been adding questions into the queue. I am paying attention, and we're going to get to answering your questions very soon. So with that in mind, and I'll start with Gohree again. You've mentioned that you're doing some really innovative things that combine music, entertainment, and VR. Can you please talk more about your collaboration with Megan Thee Stallion, and how it is similar and different from just a quote unquote regular live event? What kinds of skills are still relevant, and how have you had to adapt and stretch your skills, and what kinds of people are you working with to bring this whole event to fruition?
So our company, so the unique thing is our company, just to clarify, we make concerts, but we're not a production company. We're making tool sets. Our vision is, think about like in 5 years, there's like a Photoshop of VR where every artist, every label will make their own VR concert. So we're creating our tool sets for every label, every artist to do, so that we're not doing it on the, like, we're not making it, but we're making it to show people what's possible. In that sense, with like Megan, we made our own custom VR camera. We made our own custom VFX pipeline. And then we're also creating our own AI tool sets to edit, because we shoot in 16K stereoscopic, which is like crazy high fidelity. Like it requires a lot of different editing to create it. For those who've experienced our VR concert, or you can, if you have a Quest, go into the App Lab. You'll see Megan in live action. So it's not an avatar, but her up close. But then she's also in like crazy worlds that we built in CG. And so in my company, we have camera experts who are building VR cameras. We have VFX people, and we have Unreal engineers, like game design. So we have the top gaming people who are creating crazy stuff in there. We also have a whole stack of engineers who are helping build a platform for all this content to live on. And then also I have on my team, I have tons of different type of artists, from VFX artists, from technical artists, from animators. And so basically I'm working in a very complex environment, because it's like the combination of the music industry, the tech industry, and the game industry all combined. And all skill sets are equally important for us to create a VR concert. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of the world that I'm in right now.
No, it's super helpful, and thank you for that. And John, from what I've read, Google has described its vision around AR and VR as, in one sense, acting as a bridge between the digital and physical worlds. And to me, that really strikes at the heart of what I understand as the metaverse in a lot of ways. Can you please share with me, especially in terms of the AR glasses that you're working on, to whatever extent you can share, what kinds of considerations come into play when you're creating a product that is acting as that bridge and is providing, in this case, just-in-time information around translation? What kinds of use case factors come into play in terms of a person's context of using it, physical environment, the limitations of technology, and if you want to also add to that, some of the people that you work with to begin to grapple with these problems, these design problems and tech, not problems, but opportunities.
Yeah, for sure, opportunities. I think a lot of the issues are probably not what people think. It's less with what we can do with hardware, and more of I would say things like privacy. So huge privacy concerns with people. Do you want to use certain signals from the world to trigger experiences on your face? And then one thing I mentioned is comfort. Not everyone wears glasses. So for those people who want a helpful AR experience, but don't wear glasses, like myself, I would get a headache after too long, prescription or not. So there are a lot of concerns with what is that user base, and are they going to be able to even use the device comfortably to get the value out of it, or is the value enough for them to just deal with having this device on their face that they're not used to?
Yeah, it's so much of it comes into play when you take something that you're working on in one context, and then you see how it's used out there IRL in real life in different scenarios and different comfort levels, wearing things like glasses or headsets or devices. So that is pretty interesting. And then what kinds of colleagues are you collaborating with to work on some of these matters?
They've been really good with getting a diverse group of people on the product team from all types of backgrounds. I would say that coming from a smaller company and then onto that team, there's a separate group for everything, legal, people who cover privacy exclusively, heavy on UX researchers, of course. They're very key for building a new product and trying to figure out exactly who you're building it for, what works and what doesn't. So yeah, it's a lot of people, most of which have no experience building, you know, head-mounted displays for AR and VR. So it's been a learning experience for most people on the team, although we do have some uniquely positioned people who have worked on similar things in the past.
No, thank you for that. And it sounds extremely exciting to work on something so innovative and also incredibly useful at the same time. Garima, so I know you mentioned all of the various IP, some of the various IP that Skybound is involved in, and I myself am a fan of The Walking Dead and worked a little bit on The Walking Dead myself on some small little games way back when. And you also mentioned that Metaverse discussion or opportunities are coming from a lot of different directions. How do you approach different opportunities in addition to from a multi-platform mindset, but also e-commerce and just in general evaluating the opportunity? Because I know that you probably are dealing with a lot of folks coming to Skybound with different ideas, metaverse instantiations, NFTs, and what have you. What's the process that you use to evaluate these opportunities, and how do you see it evolving down the line in the next 6 months or a year?
Sure. I mean, without going into too much sort of specific details on what happens behind the scenes, you know, Jonathan raised some really, really good concerns, right? And those are the kind of concerns we also get to hear from our audiences. And Margaret, you've been close to the IP. You understand that fans are very, 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 very rabid, right? Like, they don't want you commercializing an IP just for the sake of making money or just for trying a new technology. They really want it to mean something or to have an impact for them. I think so. We are very cautious. We've only done a couple different things relating to the metaverse, and I know, Margaret, you had mentioned that to the sandbox project. But overall, I think we've stayed more cautious. We do get approached a lot. I can tell you, like, every single e-commerce licensing conversation I have, even if it's for physical products, the kind of things that I get approached for, obviously NFTs, people want to turn comic book covers into NFTs. People want to make collectible figures or action figures, insert a little chip at the bottom, you scan it and you have another avatar on their app. But I think also, sort of, again, going back to something that Jonathan said, data privacy is a huge concern for us. You know, our audience data is not something that we want to open the floodgates to. You know, once you start creating so many different apps and versions, there's all of that data privacy issue. So, you know, sort of long rambling short, we've been very cautious. I think there's a lot of technology being developed. I think there's a lot of tech products being developed, and Skybound, or even e-commerce, or, you know, any e-commerce professional, we are as much consumers of it as the person who's buying our product. So I think we are taking it a little bit more at a slow, I won't say a slower pace, but a little bit more measured pace for now.
Yeah, I think that's wise, and I do know what you're talking about, Garima, in terms of you really want to respect the fan base. I've worked on products myself, not other products, where you really have to protect the sanctity of your relationship with the fan base. You have to meet their expectations, and once you make a few wrong, quote unquote, wrong moves, it could potentially sour the fan base on the IP, not just in terms of one context, but multiple contexts. And so, you know, especially when you have such active fan bases like you have at Skybound, it really makes a difference.
I also, this is my hypothetical, this is a theory, but I'm still going to propose it. I do think it's also a generational thing. I think a lot of the fans that have been around for a while, they are not so quick to jump to some of these newer experiments. Whereas, like a lot of people who are playing Fortnite and Roblox, they are a lot more sort of quick to jump on and try new trends. I think, I don't want to call them older fans because I'm in that age group, but a certain demographic, I think is approaching the technology as, like you said, when the internet first came around, there were people who were taking their time to sort of get used to it, and then people who jumped headalong and tried to test different things. I think we are seeing sort of similar adaptation of the metaverse across industries.
Great point, and thank you for adding that. And I agree that we will find these differences among various populations of users in the user community. I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that are popping up in the Q&A section. So I'm going to start now with Don. It feels like currently the metaverse is tied down to one company, i.e. Facebook. Do we run the risk of limiting development, innovation, access in this case? What will it take to make the metaverse a new landscape like the internet? Anyone want to take that?
I'd like to comment on that. I think that it's clear that Facebook has taken that name, but I don't agree that they are kind of dominating as it may seem. I think you need to think of the whole, like we've mentioned video games several times with metaverses that already exist. And just because Facebook does have a lead in VR and the Oculus headset doesn't mean there won't be other ways to access any metaverses or different virtual environments that people build.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think that, when Facebook changed its name to Meta, it was definitely grabbing onto something that they already identified in the space as happening and evolving. But I think it's really interesting. For example, Gohree, you just mentioned that you've deployed for the Quest, but also Pico, which is just another sign that it's been far from predetermined who the quote unquote winners will be in this veritable competition. I don't know if you agree with that or why you ended up working with Pico in addition to the Quest headset.
So actually, as a company who's we're in VR. So VR, one of my biggest challenges as a marketer is 80% of the headsets currently that people are buying content are Quest 2 headsets. And so Meta has the lead right now in consumer headsets. But then the challenge as someone who's building content is we've actually been trying to be on the Meta Quest store for over 1 year. And so we actually just launched on the Quest App Lab. It's not in the main Quest store. It's basically like where all the apps to even be considered by Meta as an app, you have to go into the App Lab. And then we've been talking with Meta for over 1 year. Can you look at our app? How do we get into the Quest store for over 1 year? And the response is like once every 3 months. And so it's actually very undeveloper friendly. So I think there's a challenge right now with that ecosystem. But then there are players like Pico who was acquired by TikTok, and now they're investing in VR, which isn't great for people like our company. The interesting thing is because of the China-US, their headsets cannot come into the US yet. And so Pico is now, they're trying Europe and Asia. So for us, we're using Pico as a main distribution outside of the US and Meta for the US.
And you're the second company that I've spoken with who is adopting this exact strategy, where I'm hearing more and more companies are choosing Pico as their initial target device for some of these deployments where it is available, which is just another sign to me that there's still a lot of ground to cover in terms of these matters. And I, for one, am also extremely excited about the PlayStation VR stuff that's coming out. So I think it's far from determined. Does anybody else want to add to this before I move on to another question?
I do have one comment. I do think it's far from it. What's very interesting is when I'm talking with artists now, because TikTok owns Pico, every artist now says to me, I have to be on Pico plus Meta, which is very interesting. So definitely Meta doesn't.
Yeah, the gatekeeping is very interesting for a lot of these channels, because on the one hand, you want to keep the quality high, and yet in an era of user-generated content and the predominance of importance around user-generated content, you have to ask where the balance is around that strategy. Garima or John, did you want to add anything else to that before I? Okay. So I have a question here from Myron Miller. Another shout out to Professor Jody Luber from Myron, another Media Ventures alum. And I just wanted to mention everybody here on this panel is also a Media Ventures alumni. So John, what are some new trends in the market and KPIs, key performance indicators that you're currently tracking, and how does this data help you apply new strategies for product development in AR and VR? So I guess KPIs, like what are some of the KPIs you look at?
Hey, Myron, thanks for the question. There are KPIs I track internally, but externally, it's more about tracking, just seeing what other companies are trying. I think it's leaning towards a lot of trial and error with glasses, head-mounted displays, other face wearables. I don't think anyone has it right, but it's always good to check out what people are doing and where they fail to kind of learn as a group where smart glasses and other VR type devices are going.
Thank you. And I think it's really, that's a whole area. I mean, when I talk to my students, I used to say every company is a technology company, which I do believe to some extent for the most part. However, now my new thing is every company is a data company. And I think that the ways in which we're going to start measuring experiences and so-called success and things like engagement in these metaverse contexts, I think it's a very interesting area. It's constantly evolving. And I think it also raises some significant issues around privacy as well. If you can think about, if you're looking at eye tracking, heartbeat, I mean, just a whole range of factors that are going to come into play that data scientists and analysts are going to be potentially looking at in these different scenarios. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to another Q&A from Professor Jody Luber. And Jody says, Mark Zuckerberg says the metaverse has great upside, such as more collaboration across industries without borders, less environmental impact. But what do you think about the potential downsides, such as increased personal isolation or a Facebook monopoly? I will say, I don't think Facebook is poised to monopolize the space whatsoever. I think they've done a really good PR job of getting that message out there, especially through the rebranding and the renaming. I'll also say I have an Oculus and I love the Oculus. I like it because it's wireless, it's untethered, but they're not going to be the only game in town forever. So that's my thought. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably give an analog example to that. In tabletop, we have single player games, right? Like 1v1. And once those games, or, we have solo player modes to bigger games. And when that was first becoming a thing, a lot of publishers ask the same question, does this mean that people will start playing games themselves, or, they won't go to game nights, or game nights at gaming cafes will tend to sort of not be as popular. I think there's always players that enjoy that, but I don't think it risks isolation. I think to the contrary, I do think it gives certain people who would spend time with themselves the opportunity to experience something new. But ultimately, again, going back, I keep giving Jonathan all these shout outs, but going back to what Jonathan was saying, I don't think the metaverse or VR is at a place where we'll be able to wear gear for that long. I think ultimately, you know, after a couple hours of experience, people do want to take a break. And I was reading something yesterday that said that by 2026, 25% of the population will spend an hour a day on the metaverse, but that's pretty much it. So I think with an hour a day, there's still a lot of time to go out and socialize. And, you know, the pandemic has forced so much of us to live virtually. In any case, I think we do crave company. So that's what I think about it.
If I can add to that, I think, yeah, there are a lot of guesses and assumptions. I think it doesn't exist yet, so how would he know? But, you know, he's trying to push his product, right? Look at what happened with 2020, and people started working remotely over video like we're doing, and like, is this the metaverse? Like, okay, like we can work collaboratively across borders without a virtual world and a headset on our face. So my question is, what added value is there? And I don't think that they know the answer to that quite yet.
Yeah, no, all excellent points. And so I'm going to take your question, Karen Young. I'm going to just modify it a little bit. So I wanted to ask the panelists, since you are all Com alums and you all took part in the Media Ventures program, how did your time at Com, what ways did it help prepare you for your current career pathway? And then to kind of add to that, Karen's question, how easy is it to transfer to a career pathway that involves the metaverse somehow? It's kind of a two-part question. Gohree, would you mind starting that?
Sure. So I guess the question is about study Com. I think Com prepared me for the metaverse because through the exposure of multiple industries within media and multiple parts, that definitely helped me, because especially in the metaverse, nothing is actually formed yet. So you have to know everything, like from design to legal to gamification, everything. So I think that sense Com was definitely a good training ground for me. And I think the second question was how to work or how to transition.
Yeah.
For my company, I think having one skill set expertise to add value is important, because no one knows anything, right? And so as a team, if you're the expert in music or legal or licensing or design, everyone is trusting you to be the basketball player and be an expert at that and contribute. But I think the second most important skill set is just grit, because it's so fast pacing and changing. The biggest winner is the one who has grit and will keep moving. And until the metaverse is actually formed. But till then, there's too much changes happening every day.
Oh, that's excellent advice. I love that advice. I love that you mentioned the need to specialize, to go deep into something and get really good at something. And I think that's extremely important and relevant. And then the idea of having a growth mindset and having grit, which something that we talk about in Media Ventures, is also something, you know, just stick at it. Persistence is really a key to success. So thank you for that. That really resonates with me a lot. Who wants to go next? John, do you want to talk about how your time at Com influenced what you've done, and how a career pathway that involves the quote unquote metaverse somehow, how one might pursue that?
Right. So I started in video games. It was just something I always wanted to do. But my time at Com, again, exposed me to a lot. I did a couple different internships, like in music and pharma, healthcare, like all over the place. So I got to kind of explore, and kind of ended back into sort of video games, 3D, AR. So I think that was good for me to just kind of settle on, okay, this is what I want to continue doing. And I still enjoy it. I'm still passionate about it, and it's just always been a part of my career up to this point.
Oh, thank you for that. And of course, that resonates with me as somebody who spent the majority of their career in the video games industry. It's a passion, and I've learned so much being in that industry. And it's been amazing to me to see how much games and what we do in games has proliferated throughout so many different industry sectors. It's really mind blowing, to be totally honest. And Garima, would you please share with the audience, how your time at Com influenced your career decisions and pathway, and how can somebody transition into these metaverse roles?
Sure. A couple of different things. I think one of the most important things during my media ventures experience with Jody, Professor Kathy Perrin, Janak, who was one of our professors at that time, was just the focus on innovation. They constantly during every lecture or during every project were like, how do you innovate on this, right? Like if there's a traditional business idea, or if there's a business idea built within a traditional industry, how do you innovate? And I think that way of thinking is super helpful. It did help me incredibly when I came to LA. My first internship was with an influencer company called Studio 71. And, like everyone else, I had consumed influencer created content, but I really didn't understand how the industry worked. So sort of working at the ground floor of that, helping build businesses for those influencers was so enlightening. But, all of it came from asking those questions, what else can be done? How can I push the envelope here? What's different? How do I create something that's scalable? That was important. The other thing, and, this might not be a very hard skill set, but I think being at Com taught me the value of networking. I went to every single event that I could. I went to the Harvard Innovation Lab events. I went to, any other lectures that were happening. I went to the Build Lab. And I continued to do the same my first couple of years in LA. The pandemic slowed things down, but any opportunity that I would get to go and meet even just BU alum proved so incredibly helpful. I mean, even this panel, like I've learned so much from all of my fellow panelists. And I think that that's something that BU gives you. BU has an incredible network of alums in LA. And, to be in industries that are constantly changing, the best source of knowledge are people who are working within the industries. Like Gohree said, right? Like none of us really know what's happening, but to talk to people who are helping innovate within that industry, I think gives you a lot more knowledge. So that's my 2 for 1. That's also advice for how you transition into the metaverse. Make sure you're connected to people who are in those industries. I think the second thing is being a subject matter expert is extremely important. Again, to Gohree's point, the other thing for me is, you have to build basic skill sets. I cannot tell you the number of people that I interview who don't have basic project management skills. Like you could be at the highest role in an organization, but if you can project manage your business, if you can project manage your project, if you can manage your team, none of it works out. So I would say build basic skills, understand basic business principles. You should understand profit and loss, even if you're not in a revenue generating role. Understanding how your service role will impact the business ultimately helps you make better decisions. And the metaverse is, at the end of the day, an extension of our physical world. Everything that happens there is based on a skill from this world. So really, you need to have knowledge of how things work. Again, going back to, I just feel like I'm amplifying everything my co-panelists are saying. So what Gohree was saying about, understanding gamification, understanding, programming, video game technology, blockchain, it's all built on the principles of engineering. So I think those skills are important to have. Choose what interests you. If it's marketing, understand all aspects of marketing, and then you can go apply to metaverse marketing. If you want to be a data scientist, who, by the way, I think will make a killing in the metaverse, like understand data science and then go and apply it in the metaverse.
Oh, wow, I'm really, really grateful and impressed with that feedback and that insight, and for everyone's insight here. It's so valuable. I'm going to try to squeeze in a few more questions from the audience, and I'm going to tie some of your questions into my next question. And Garima, you've touched on this as well. We hear a lot about the concept of digital twins. So we have companies like NVIDIA, working heavily in the omniverse space, building digital twins. You have different industries, such as the medical industry, building digital twins of the human body, or even down at the cellular level. We have real estate companies building digital twins, which are basically digital versions of physical objects and people that exist in the real world, that are driven by very, very granular and hyper accurate, the thinking goes, data that really informs the existence of these digital twins. What are your thoughts around digital twins, and how do you see that sort of initiative impacting either what you do or entertainment, media, human beings existing on this planet and potentially having digital twins of themselves? Can you each please speak a little bit about that and your thoughts around that? Gohree, do you want to start? Do you have something? I see you shaking your head, so do you mind starting off?
Yeah.
Sure.
So in my world, since I work with mostly artists, I think one interesting is I had a meeting with the CEO recently of an artist that everyone here will know. And what they told me was that they've been already testing with in their music videos, with the artists, and even with the voice. And no one in the world has pointed out that it was a digital twin and it was not the real voice. So it's actually happening in music right now. And which affects my work because I'm presenting VR concerts, and it's like, what does this all mean if the artists are already, creating virtual twins and, virtual voices, and we're at a point already today where people can't recognize it, whether it's a virtual twin or not. And so the question that we're already at the point where we're beginning to blur the real and the future. So there's like a philosophical question for me every day. It's like, what am I using this technology for? And what am I selling? And what am I building? And I'm at this place every day because it's like already happening in music and people don't even realize it. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It is already happening. And I don't think that policy or best practices or standards are going to keep up with the level of innovation and ways in which these ideas are applied on a real level that impacts so many people. Anyone else? Garima, did you want to talk about your thoughts around digital twins?
Sure. I mean, we haven't really seen a ton of real life implementation within e-commerce yet of this. I'm sure, I've been reading articles about people creating twins and dressing them up. There's that not superficial, but there's that dressing aspect to it. But I think the whole digital twin technology is very, very helpful for organizations, right? Like people are going to create replicas of buildings to see how much material they'll actually need. We've all read those articles. I think digital twin technology will really become real, and excuse my alliterations, will really become real to real people once it has real value. I did write that one down. But I do think right now it's all very new, but once people begin to get real value out of it, so surgeons could, right? I was reading that Harvard, if I'm not mistaken, they have a digital twin partnership to create a heart and start to do better heart surgeries. That's real value. I think the way I could foresee this being implemented in my universe is really, if you were hypothetically building a direct to consumer or a store, a brick and mortar store for product, you could run a digital twin of that and work through all the processes, right? Like instead of learning real time how your inventory runs out, or real time about, how people are going to interact with advertisements in the store, I think you could stimulate that, run it through different scenarios and increase efficiencies. That's how I would see it being implemented, but I do think we are a far ways off from that scenario becoming real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working in blockchain, I heard a lot about real estate, digital twins of real estate. So there are a lot of efforts on that, and we'll see how that all pans out in the near-ish future. John, did you want to add to this discussion about your view of digital twins?
Yeah. first, I think it's awesome how Garima is thinking outside the box of digital twin when we're just thinking of people, but it has to do with real estate and buildings and hearts and things like that. So that's awesome. I think it's amazing and scary at the same time, but I'd also separate digital twin from avatar. I think avatar is the more novel use of having a version of yourself in the virtual world, which has already been happening and opens up gates for ads, virtual goods. Nike had some things in Roblox, if I remember correctly. So it's really opening up kind of the floodgates into the metaverse for advertisers and companies that want kind of to get their feet wet in there. So I think that part is definitely positive.
So it's shocking. We're almost complete. We've almost taken up an entire hour with this discussion, which is surprising for me because the time has flown so quickly. I have a million more questions I wanted to ask, and I see so many great questions in the Q&A part of Zoom. So if I didn't get to your questions, everybody, please feel free to follow up with our panelists or with me, and we'll try to get you the answers that you're looking for. I'm really impressed with the really amazing quality and range of questions that I've seen in the discussion. So given that we just have a few more minutes, do you have any parting either words of advice for our students around careers in the metaverse, or thoughts about where you think things are going to be heading in the next, say, 5 years, which I think in the world of tech and innovation is like 100 years for other things? I would just love to hear your thoughts of where you think it's heading, or any advice that you might have to give. And do you want to start off? Maybe we'll start off with John on that front.
Yeah, I guess I'd echo something that Garima said, which is there are many different roles like you can look into and focus more on the company and what they're doing rather than thinking of like the metaverse as a whole, because each company is going to in some way be forced to think about it by themselves and what their strategy is for the metaverse. So that could be your way in to either make a role for yourself or attach yourself to something that they're already opening up. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And Garima, would you mind sharing your thoughts on this front?
Yeah, I do think ultimately the metaverse is going to be successful if it's personalized, if it is feature rich, and if it's, it's more customized to every individual who gets to experience it. If we are all getting the same experience, ultimately it'll not be as interesting. So, I do think when you think about the metaverse as a whole and where you could contribute, or if you want a career in it, think about where you could add value within those three realms. This is like my secret pro tip. If any one of you is interested in law, I believe metaverse lawyers are going to make a fuck ton of money. Excuse my bad language. So if anyone's interested, so you could study that law and then be one of the pioneers in the field. On the flip side, if you hire a law firm to do your metaverse contracts, please check the credentials, make sure they have experience in it, because all jokes apart, right? Like my team is working on an AI card game, and the legality around that is so gray right now. AI technically is creating new images, but those images are sourced from the internet. So do you really own the new work you're creating? We were reading of some recent case where somebody tried to trademark, or not trademark, I apologize, copyright. I obviously didn't go to law school. Somebody tried to copyright a new piece of artwork that had been created by an AI engine. So there's a lot happening in that. But I do think if you're interested in data science, it's a fantastic opportunity within the metaverse. Data is the how we used to hear content is king, it still is, but data is its queen, in my opinion. Like Nothing will happen without it. And then I do think product managers and project managers will always be extremely important, whether it's video games, gaming, television, entertainment, or the metaverse. I think those are very, very core skill sets. And, ultimately do something that you enjoy doing. Just because metaverse is the hype word for the day, don't follow that. Really, really build your skill set to what you enjoy most, and then you'll be able to fit it in a field that it's useful for.
Excellent advice. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. And Gohree, do you want to add to the advice?
Sure.
So far?
So while listening to everyone, especially what Garima said, and like contracts, we've been making new contracts that's never been done before, and our lawyers are making so much money. We're making contracts that's never been it's been taking 1 year. Our first contract took over 1 year, and we had to start from scratch. Like there's nothing that our lawyers have anything because we're making stuff that's never been done before. And so when I think about Garima's feedback, whether you're a lawyer, whether you want to be a technical artist, whether you want to become a producer or be a designer or engineer, I think important is you have a very solid skill set, like you're technical creative skill set, whether it's law, whether it's design, whether it's sound, but then you also need to be abstract creative because we're going into the unknown. And so the people who are only technical creative, you're telling everyone just know-how that doesn't, everyone's trying to figure out something that's never been done before. So that's where you use your technical knowledge and be abstract creative. And so the people who I think are really successful, whatever you want to do, think about what that is in the abstract, and then you'll do well.
Such amazing advice. I really just want to thank everyone. And before we sign off, I wanted to mention that the next COM event is happening on December 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern. From insights to action, kind of relevant, from insights to action, how to convince leaders to embrace consumer research. Speaking of data, every company is a data company. But anyway, I can't thank each of you enough for being part of this event. And I really am grateful for the insights that you've shared. And I want to thank the audience for your amazing questions and for being part of this panel discussion as well. And I also want to thank Dean DiChristina for introducing us, the College of Communication, Media Ventures, Professor Jody Luber, and everyone else who made this event possible. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.